It's not just let's do it somehow so that it works, but how can we really shine?
So, good evening, and thanks for joining another edition of Lean by Nature call. In this space, we talk about the lean management principles and how we can use that to sustain improvements in our life, day to day, personal or professional life. And we also talk about the natural cycles of improvement and draw inspiration from them to achieve sustained improvement in our lives. So that's been the flavor of our last few calls, and Elizabeth has been talking about the natural cycles of improvement in kind of 8 broad steps. And so far, we have covered 4 of them, and we're going to cover the next 2 today. So, before we begin, I'll just try to do a quick recap of those steps, and then we can get into the next 2 steps, which Elizabeth is going to help us with. So I think the first step of the natural cycles of improvement that Elizabeth talked about in the last few calls, we talked about the observe phase, and that's the starting point where we try and observe the environment and the circumstances in which we are going to operate. Who are the resources available? What are the current level of performance? And try to capture whatever information is available before we get started. So I think that is critical first stage of the natural cycles of improvement, as I understand. And followed by that, there's an envision stage, which I could connect with one of the habits of of highly effective people. That's a book by that name, and it talks about begin with the end in mind. So when we start the improvement, we envision what we are going to achieve and how that state of mind would be, how that the physical transformation would look like. So we'll try to envision that, and that we get inspiration from that. So that's the second phase of natural cycles of improvement that Elizabeth mentioned. And the last call, we talked about the next 2 stages, which is the connect and the act adapt stage. And when we talk about the connect stage, we talk about the current situation. No matter how well we plan, the current situation may still differ from whatever our planning would have been. So try to connect with the reality. That's critical, and that's what happens really, as I understand, in the connect phase. And then we come to the act adapt stage, where we actually execute. We get into the execution part without worrying about what resources we have right now or how well did we plan or not. Now is the time to really put our heads together and just execute, and that's what resonated in terms of act and adapt stages. So I think now we are ready to get into the next few steps, which I'm going to request Elizabeth to talk about shortly. But before that, we can do a small kind of check-in, and and I like to ask just a small question of the participants, and that is, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the word nature? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? So if you can probably speak it out, and or if you can unmute yourself and share, and we can exchange a few thoughts around that, and then we can get into right into the topic. Thank you. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the word nature? So I'm seeing, let's see. Okay. So green, harmony, flow. Wow. Green, harmony, and flow. That resonates wonderfully with me as well. Thank you for sharing. So let me share what I think of when I think of nature. Absolutely, it's the trees, the landscape, the sun and the stars. The something that really I connect with when I think of nature. And as an afterthought, I think it also ties in to our behavior when we say it's a natural way of conducting ourselves. We say it's our nature. So I think that's another connotation we sometimes use when we talk about nature. And when you talk about harmony, I think it was on the chat. That's a beautiful word. I associate nature with effortless, actions, effortless actions like breathing. Breathing is a very natural process, and that's what wonders resonates beautifully when you talk about nature. It should be effortless. And for those who are joining, thank you for joining. We're just getting started, and if you can just put yourself on mute if you are not speaking, and that will help us to minimize the background noise. Thank you. And we're just doing a small check-in right now, which is getting to know that what comes to your mind when you think of the word nature. And that's what we are trying to use as check-in right now. So Elizabeth talked about green, harmony, and when I think of nature, I think of the trees, I think of our behavior, the way we conduct ourselves. And just before, I think the participants joined, we were talking about nature being effortless process. Very simple thing like breathing, that's a natural process. And one definition, if we want to just put in there, is anything that's created by God, that's nature. And anything that is man-made, I mean, that's like, I would say, not nature, if you will. So those are some of the thoughts that are resonating. So we have another input on the chat: balance. So nature is balance. Wow. So for those who joined right now, just put on the chat what is the first word that comes to your mind when you think of the word nature. So we have a few inputs here: green, harmony, flow, balance, beautifully described in Hindi. Prakriti, wonderful, Prakriti. And that's already created. Wow. That's very insightful. Thank you. Already created. And that ties in beautifully with the definition created by God. So whatever is not created by humans, created by God is natural. So thank you for resonating some of these thoughts. And I think this is just the right time where we can now get into our topic of natural cycles of improvement. And over the last few calls, we have been talking about 8 steps of natural cycles of improvement. And we have been able to cover 4. And I'll now pass it over to Elizabeth to help us walk us through those 4 steps, if you will, briefly, and then take us through the rest of the 2 steps that we plan to cover today. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna share my screen now to give you an overview of the stages, and it's kind of the whole cycle of a day or a month or a year. You can look at that also as like that cycle. And first, we started, as you mentioned already, with the observe and envision phase, and we went further to the connect and adapt phase or act phase, which is really getting into the thing. First, we observed and envisioned and looked at what's really there, and then we did something, and then now it's about to just really strengthen the new thing that we brought in. So it's about creating not just a few times of that, but really going into a routine and making it more of a habit. And then the share and teach phase, which is basically looking at, okay, well, how can I give it to the next generation, so to speak, or other people that it's made bigger and that we can all learn from it. And the last 2 stages, I'm just going to hint we're going to talk about next time, is the integrate and mentor phases, which are more of an inward focused phases that are equal to the winter time, if you want to look at it from nature's cycles perspective. And yeah, so I'm gonna go right into the whole process where if you look at the strengthen phase, I mentioned briefly that we did a few things, we tried it out, we saw what worked, what didn't, and now we really need to get into how can we actually make that stick? Because so many times we do something new, we change something, a new habit, a new process, but then there is a tendency of at least humans to really want to stick with habits, and then we fall back into our old patterns or habits. So the strengthen phase is really about seeing that we can grow those new muscles, that we can keep that new approach, new process. And one thing that really helped me also look into that was looking into the natural cycles, like the year-long cycle, which the equivalent of that would be around the late summer or mid or late summer, where like if you look at the trees and everything else, like the fruits are like an apple, for example, it's grown to its full size, but it might still be green or not really ripe yet, but the outward growth, the action is done. Now it's about the strengthening, about the ripening, about really making it juicy and nice to harvest later on. And that's kind of yeah, the stage where we need to look at, and it's really important to also have a focus on that, and not to say, okay, we did something new and now it has to be done, and nobody really pays attention that it takes some effort to stick with those new routines. And one phrase that I got while I was training in the wilderness was that really stuck with me, was be your most impeccable self. So it's not so much about comparing yourself to others in that stage. Like you could maybe even in the action phase or in the connecting phase or whatever, you look at like the size and who's like, are the others doing something different and finding new inspiration. It's fine in those stages, but in the strengthen phase, it's about really looking at your own growth and looking at, okay, I can be my best self and I can grow on the inside more, like the apple. Like it's gonna be the best apple he or she is gonna wants to be. Like I don't know. It's so important to strive for that and to see, okay, it's not just let's do it somehow so that it works, but how can we really shine? And in order to do that, it's not just important to remind ourselves, okay, it's not about comparing, it's about being our best selves, but also how can we make the process in a way that we can actually continue that new process. So we mentioned it, I think, a few times. It's easy to describe in the process of, okay, I want to work out more and be more flexible and do like have a better moving body. How can we get through that strengthen phase? Because in the beginning we start out everything's new and we're looking at this and that, but how can you over a long term stick with that? And in that stage, in that phase, it's really important to also look at the self-care aspect. So looking at that you're nourished well, like the tree needs a lot of water, needs a lot of different other like minerals or whatever to really strengthen. And the body, for example, needs protein and everything else to really strengthen from the inside. And that self-care, it could be that you're not working out every day, but only every other day so that the body can rest, or that you're washing yourself regularly, or whatever it is that makes you feel good, that makes you feel joy when you're doing that new process, instead of thinking, okay, that's hard to do and I need to a lot of effort to do it. We need to connect it to something that feels good to us. So the self-care aspect is a big thing in the strengthening phase, both physically and mentally. And also when I thought about what kind of story I can share on that, it's also in the story that I shared last time, where I was in the wilderness and I was the slowest person, always lagging behind, and everybody had to wait for me. And I was already exhausted, constantly feeling I'm the slowest and I need to improve, and I couldn't improve as fast. But over time, I was very aware that I needed to take good care of myself, to not be hard on myself, not to push myself down. You're the slowest, you're so awful, and whatever, but to really look at, okay, yeah, I can contribute in other ways. For now, I'm the slowest, so I can contribute in other ways, strengthen my mental health that way until I could be faster. And so that's just a really important thing, to also strengthen maybe other parts, or also focus on other parts that we can do well, instead of just focusing how we're not there where we want to be yet. And yeah, that comes further into the next stage of the share and teach, which also sometimes it is integrated in some processes, and also in the lean process it's in there. But so many times I think in companies it's forgotten that it's not about, for example, one person or one team figuring out and doing it differently, but it's also about sharing. Okay, we did it this way and this way and this way, and you could do it too, so others can do it and maybe even improve from that, and then share that again. And so it can be like a fruitful thing that we share it with others, and they can improve too, and they can help us improve again. So it's that whole cycle. And so the sharing, it has a lot of different aspects to it. Another one is that we build resilience, which is, as we all know by now, resilience is important. If something out of the ordinary happens, if someone is ill and can't work anymore, if something happens and only one or two people actually know about how to operate a certain machinery, because they never taught anybody else to do it, then that's a big problem. But if you shared it with others, if you actually taught them, okay, that's how you do it, that's how I learned to do it better and whatever, then they can do it too, and that brings resilience into the group. So for example, we had at some point in my wilderness training, there was, in the whole group of I think 6 or 7 people, there was only one person who reliably knew how to make a fire without matches or anything else with the bow drill. And I made myself very aware that if anything happens to that person, there are some people who kind of know and they might be able to do it, but it was a real risk to not have enough people reliably being able to make a fire. So it would have been actually a lot more prudent to take more time for that person to share all his insights with how to do it and really learn and focus more on that, because that was a real risk. And yeah, another big part of the teaching also is that if we learn something new, we adapt it to something. Ah, okay, that's how we can do it better. Sometimes we don't really know like all the ins and outs of it. And yeah, it worked once, it worked twice maybe. But if we actually teach it and show it to others, we're actually learning a lot more and figuring out, ah, okay, it worked that way. But what if it, like, the situation changes and it's somehow different, and would it still work? And so it's a lot more about how much we can learn by teaching others. It's like also in in school, there a lot of times kids are told, yeah, teach it to others so you can learn more about it. And that really is a big part. And if you look at nature, that's the main thing. If a wolf has pups and they're growing up and they're learning, and as soon as they're old enough, they're taught how to hunt and everything. So that it's important for especially a pack of wolves or any other like pack animal that are hunting together, they have to teach the others, otherwise they can't hunt together. um, and yeah, so that's a really big part, so that they can strengthen as a whole and hunt bigger animals than they would be able to do with just one or two people or wolf people. um, so it's everywhere. And even if you look at the plants, that's like the ripening of the apple, it's the ripening of the seeds of the next generation, of thinking ahead into the future. Okay, what happens if I'm not around for any reason? It's the same kind of logic that the trees or the plants are having, really ripening the seeds for the next generation. Yeah, and another big thing in that area is the gratitude. So gratitude is always important because then we're connecting to not taking anything for granted. And it's setting us up into a different mindset, that we see, ah, okay, we're so blessed, we have so many gifts around us that we can actually do the thing that we're doing. We have enough resources to actually improve. We have the support of others and everything. We're just, yeah, feeling really grateful. And gratitude is something that we can practice. And I, over time, learned the depth of gratitude, because I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I talked with someone, and he was really negative, and he said, I can't be grateful for anything. And he was having a roof over his head, a workplace, he was fed, he had friends. There were so many things that I could see that he could be grateful for, but he couldn't. And also later on, going more into the topic of gratitude, I realized, okay, I can be grateful for so many things. For the water that flows all around us, that is flowing through everything, that is giving life to the plants, and the sun and the fire, who's giving the energy into everything, and making it warm, and helping us in so many other ways, and the air that we don't see, but it kind of, with the wind, it brings the change, and the new weather, and every weather is different, and it all brings their good or bad things, and the earth that is just kind of holding everything, and being grateful for that, and being grateful for all the little things that are in the earth, the worms and the little creepy crawlies that some people don't like, but they're like a really important and essential part of the whole cycle. And to think of all the different things, of how it's all connected, and being grateful for each step, being grateful for all the people that were involved in order for us here now to have that possibility of connecting over such big distances, having the computer there, having the internet, having the spaces that we're sitting in, and so many people contributed to us actually being here. And if we're making ourselves aware that we can be grateful for that, we need to be grateful for that. It's not just a given that we have all of that. And so with that gratitude, we feel a lot more full, so that we can share that with others as well. So that's kind of the connection to the sharing phase. We can share our gratitude if we're full with it. And yeah, I think that's the main thing that I wanted to share on those two phases. Yeah, maybe Aman, you have some more insights of how that all connects with the lean structure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'd also invite the participants to put on the chat whatever resonated with them while Elizabeth was sharing the improvement, natural cycles of improvement, and particularly focusing on the strengthening and share teach stages. And in the meantime, I'd like to definitely talk about what resonated in me. When you shared about the strengthen phase, I think that's the time we pick up pace. In the initial 4 stages, it's mainly about the direction. So there are 2 critical aspects when we go, in a journey. One is the direction, and then we have the speed. And I think it's critical that initially we focus on getting that direction right, because if the direction is wrong and we are heading with a fast speed, then we are definitely going in the wrong, we're not going to reach the goal. So it's important to get the direction right. So I think when you talked about the observe, envision, connect, act, those stages are helping us get the right direction, whether we are on the right track. And once we feel that yes, we are on the right track, then we pick up pace. And that's what happens when you talked about forming the habits, sustaining the momentum. And one thing I also particularly liked is probably breaking away from the herd mentality. And that's what you talked about. Like in the act adapt stage, we are trying to trying to understand each other and the teamwork and what we can contribute. But this strengthen stage is more about inner resolution. How much conviction we have towards the goal, and to strengthen that conviction. I think that's what you talked about, and that is great. And personally, if you ask me, what I do for strengthening is try to have fun with the task at hand. So it's important for me to enjoy what I'm doing, and that's what I try to do, is not to take the fun out of the activity or the task at hand, and try to be creative and make sure that that we enjoy what we're doing. And that's my way of strengthening strengthening what we're doing. And the second point that resonated is when you talk about the share or teach stage. I think we are more now getting into the collaboration aspect. So the initial part is kind of the personal journey or interpersonal journey, but now the shared teach, we are trying to extrapolate the effort. We are trying to bring in more and more people, and because you're getting confidence, you have got the direction right, you're picking up pace, now you want to collaborate with more people. So two words resonated with me on this stage, the shared stage. One is collaborate, and second is synergy. Trying to get a synergy into the effort, and you talked about the resilience stages. So when we talk about the management aspect of it, I think couple of management principles go well in this stage. One is the delegation part. You know, the supervisors need to delegate responsibility, and the teamwork, and you know, the multi-skilling. All those aspects come handy at this stage where we're trying to get into the share and the teach experience stages. And the last thing which I definitely want to reiterate, which I also shared last time, these 8 steps tie in very beautifully with the PDCA cycle, the classic Deming process improvement cycle. So the first three, I would say the 2 stages, the observe and vision, go very well with the planning phase. We are planning, observing. Then the connect and act stage go very well with the do part. When you do, just do it. And then the strengthen and the share, which we discussed today, that's like a checking whether we're in the right direction, whether we want to do any modification, and we can collaborate and actually go full-fledged into the journey. And I presume the next 2 stages, which we're going to talk about next time, the integrate and the mentor, is then going to be the actioning, like after checking whatever modifications we do, and then the consolidation of the whole effort. So, but we'll come to that in the next stage. But that's what resonated with me on these points. So let's see. We have a few points on the chat, and I'm just trying to bring it up right now. So some phrase you said you remember. Okay.
Yeah, there was a question that I answered in the chat.
Yes, so I know what we're talking about here. I think what we're talking about is the going alone on this one. You know, impeccable self. Absolutely, that's what was the question about. That instead of the herd mentality which we were trying to follow till the act adapt stage, you talked about going trying to identify your own individual strength and keep your own motivation up. Try to have fun with what you're doing. Let the pace be slow, but you know, getting the momentum right. I think that's what the question resonated. So thank you, Elizabeth, for answering that already. But yeah, so let's yeah. Okay, wonderful. So we have participant. Thank you for enlightening session. Similar thought given by Swami Vivekananda. Wonderful. He's a spiritual leader and guru in India. Elizabeth, man is potentially divine. Journeys to manifest the divinity within. Each one of us carries within an infinite source of power, strength, and goodness that manifests itself in various possibilities. Awesome, and that's a great input. Thank you for sharing. It's beautifully said. We already, and I think I get reminded of a phrase from the same person, Vivekanand, Swami Vivekanand. He said that education is perfection, which is already in a manifestation in a man. So man is already perfect. Education just tries to bring it up. So I think it's something similar to what our participant mentioned. So thank you for the insights, and let's see if we have any more comments here or any questions. Yeah, so
I actually had some short story that I forgot to tell before.
Sure, go ahead.
In the strengthen for the strengthen no, the share and teach phase. So basically, it's that whole thing that I briefly mentioned about if we share, like one team learns something and they share it with others, and then they can learn from that and improve from that. It was really interesting when again, when I was in my wilderness experience, we had the challenge of finding out where deer were located, where they would go and what they would like, when they would be where and stuff like that. And there was a big area that we needed to cover, and different levels of how much knowledge about deer and how much knowledge about tracking everybody had, what to look out for. And so we divided up into smaller groups and went into separate areas. So we had 4 different areas that groups went into. And every day we went there and observed, okay, where did we find some tracks and what kind of tracks and how did we see that and where did they go and where was it the same as yesterday and stuff like that. And every time we came back and shared what we learned. Every time there was some more details about, okay, that's how we did it that way. And okay, yeah, now that I know this, I could more in detail find out how old was that track, or were they going, or how many were there and stuff like that. So every time we brought, like every group brought the knowledge back, shared it, and then the whole group had that knowledge and bring that further into the next day of what they were exploring. And so overall we could learn and grow that much faster, as if instead we were in our small little groups and not ever sharing anything with the others. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
So that was indeed like a collaboration. It's a synergy and a collaboration coming together beautifully. So I think that's great. Yeah, wonderful. So okay. I know we are at the top of the hour, and I don't see any questions. So yeah, thank you for the correction here. Education is the manifestation of perfection, which is already in man. Thank you. Yes. So I think on that note, we are ready to just wind up the call. And Elizabeth, if you can just give us a heads up of the upcoming call and what we're going to talk about, and we wrap up in a few minutes from now. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the last 2 phases of that whole 8-stage cycle are the integrate and mentor phases. And that's a lot more like, the integration phase is usually something that's not on the outside. Like if you look at nature, it's as soon as we go into the fall, everything kind of, there's the harvest, and that's kind of equivalent to the teaching and sharing, and then we're more like, okay, what did we learn from all of that? How is that helping us in the next cycle and stuff like that? And the mentoring is also more into not just teaching, but helping people get to certain stages on their own. And yeah, so that's a short idea of what's to come next time, which is going to be I think the 23rd of March, and it's a Tuesday, not a Thursday as I wrote in my email, but a Tuesday, the same time as every time, which is I think 8:30 your time, so in India, and 4 p.m. in Europe. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, and see you next time, hopefully.
Yes, thank you so much for your contribution and your valuable inputs. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.